Your baby is alone in the room. No one is talking to them. No toy, no light, no sound. And then they smile. Not a twitch, not a reflex, a full, warm, knowing smile, aimed at something you cannot see. You've probably laughed it off, called it gas, called it a dream, but what if that smile is the most intelligent thing a human being does in their entire life, and we've been too afraid to ask why? Here is what nobody tells you. That smile, the one at nothing, may be one of the first signs that a human mind is becoming conscious. Not just aware, conscious. And the science behind it reaches into the deepest questions humans have ever asked. Questions about what we are before we become who we are. Questions about memory, about identity, about where the self actually comes from. Researchers have spent decades studying the newborn brain, and every single time they get close to understanding that smile, the mystery gets deeper. Because that baby isn't smiling at nothing, they're smiling at something we have completely forgotten how to see. For years, the official answer was simple: gas. That's what most pediatric textbooks said for most of the 20th century. Newborn smiles are involuntary muscle contractions caused by digestive activity, meaningless, biological noise. And for a while, that was enough, because it was easy, it was clean. But then something happened. Parents kept reporting it, doctors kept seeing it. Babies smiling, not randomly, not briefly, but with direction, with intention, smiling towards specific corners of rooms, smiling at empty chairs, smiling upward at the ceiling, with the kind of soft recognition you only give to something familiar. And the gas theory couldn't explain that. It also couldn't explain what the brain scans showed, because when researchers finally put newborn brain activity under high-resolution imaging during one of these spontaneous smiles, what they found wasn't noise. What they found changed the conversation entirely. In 2014, a team of developmental neuroscientists at Harvard Medical School began mapping the neural activity of infants during the first 12 weeks of life. What they were looking for was simple. What causes the brain to generate a spontaneous smile when no external stimulus is present? What they found surprised everyone in the room. During those unprovoked smiles, the ones at nothing, the areas of the brain that lit up were not the primitive reflex centers, not the brainstem, not the basic survival circuits. The activity was happening in the limbic system, the emotional core of the brain, the same region that lights up in adults during moments of deep recognition, during reunion, during love. Let that sit for a moment. A baby, days old, with a brain that cannot yet process language, cannot form lasting memory, cannot understand object permanence, that baby's emotional brain is firing like someone who just recognized a face they deeply missed. And it gets stranger. A separate study from the University of Cambridge looked at what they called endogenous smiling, smiles that originate from within, not from outside. And they discovered that these internal smiles in newborns occur most frequently during a very specific state of consciousness. Not deep sleep, not full wakefulness. The threshold, the exact boundary between sleeping and waking. The moment the mind is half in one world and half in another. Here is what the science is quietly pointing toward, and I want you to stay with me, because this is the part most people aren't ready to hear. When a baby is born, their brain is not a blank slate. Before the eyes open, before the first breath, the fetal brain has already been active for months, dreaming in a sense, processing, running simulations of experience without any experience to simulate. Scientists call this spontaneous neural activity, but some researchers have started calling it something more provocative: pre-experiential consciousness. The idea that before you ever touch the world, your mind is already practicing being a mind. And during those threshold moments, those half-sleep, half-wake states where babies smile at nothing, Some neuroscientists now believe the infant brain is processing the only reality it has ever known, the womb. The sound of a heartbeat that was the whole world, the rhythm of a breathing body that was home, the pressure of warmth on all sides. That smile at nothing, maybe a smile at everything that was. A farewell, a memory the conscious mind will never be able to retrieve, but the emotional brain never fully releases. The baby isn't smiling at an empty room. The baby is smiling at the last place they felt completely, entirely safe. But here's where it gets even stranger, because this isn't just about babies. This is about you, right now, and something that happens in your own mind that you have never once been able to explain. In 2019, a sleep researcher named Dr. Isabel Carvalho at the University of Lisbon ran an unusual experiment. She wasn't studying babies, she was studying adults. Specifically, she was studying the hypnagogic state, that strange, drifting threshold your brain enters in the first few minutes of falling asleep, the place where you're not quite awake, not quite dreaming, where faces appear from nowhere, where you hear your name and no one called it. What she found connected back to those infant smiles in a way no one expected. When adult subjects were gently monitored in this threshold state, a significant portion of them showed the same emotional brain activation pattern that Harvard researchers had documented in smiling newborns, the limbic system lighting up, not from external input, from within. And when those subjects were gently woken and asked what they experienced, many of them described the same thing, a feeling of being held, of warmth, of safety so complete they couldn't quite find a word for it. Several subjects cried and didn't know why. One woman said, and this has stayed with researchers ever since, she said, "I felt like I was home. Not any home I've ever lived in, just home." Think about that. Every night when you drift toward sleep, your adult brain may be briefly touching the same emotional frequency that a newborn touches when they smile at nothing. The memory isn't stored in language, it isn't stored in image, it's stored in feeling, and your body never forgets it. You're not just watching this, you lived this. There was a moment before your first memory, before your first word, before you even knew you were a you, when the world was warm and whole and entirely safe. And something in your nervous system encoded that feeling, not as a thought, as a baseline, as the thing your brain compares every other experience to for the rest of your life. Some psychologists believe this pre-birth emotional memory is the origin point of what we later call longing. That ache you feel sometimes when music hits a certain way, or you're somewhere beautiful and you feel inexplicably sad. That feeling of missing something you can't name. You felt it, haven't you? That's not nostalgia for a place. That's not sadness about a person. That might be your nervous system reaching back, past every memory you have, toward the first feeling it ever knew. And the baby smiling at nothing is doing the same thing, reaching back one last time before the world rushes in and covers it over. Now, here's the layer that even the researchers hesitate to say out loud. If consciousness begins before experience, if the mind is already running, already feeling, already dreaming before it has anything to dream about, then what exactly is it using? This is where neuroscience quietly brushes up against philosophy, and the answer is uncomfortable. Some theorists, including Nobel-affiliated researchers in quantum biology, have proposed that in the earliest weeks of neural development, the brain is not building consciousness from scratch, it is tuning into a pattern that already exists. Much like a radio doesn't create music, it receives it. The brain in its earliest state may be in its most receptive condition, before the filters, before the ego, before the relentless story we tell ourselves about who we are. And that smile, that strange, directed, luminous smile at an empty corner of a room, may be the last moment a human being is fully open, before the world teaches them to close. Here is what this means for you if you are raising a child. Those first 12 weeks are not a waiting room. They're not a period of basic maintenance until the real development begins. Neuroscience now tells us that the emotional architecture being built in those quiet, still moments is the foundation of every relationship your child will ever have. Their capacity for trust, their ability to feel safe, their default setting for what love feels like, the way you hold them, the sound of your voice in an empty room, the warmth of your presence even when they appear to be asleep and unaware. They are not unaware. They are building a world inside themselves, and you are in it. What happens in those quiet, unremarkable moments is the most important thing that will ever happen, and most of us walk right past it. That smile at nothing. You've seen it. Maybe you've filmed it. Maybe you've sent it to someone and written, "Too cute," and moved on. But now you know what you were actually looking at. You were looking at the last flicker of a world that existed before this one, a private world, complete and warm and whole, one that no one else will ever see, and that the child themselves will never remember, but will spend their entire life unconsciously searching for. You were watching a mind say goodbye to its first home, and smile, not from confusion, not from gas, not from reflex, but from something that looks in every measurable way exactly like peace. We spend our whole lives trying to find that feeling again, in relationships, in places, in music at 2 in the morning, in the half second before we fall asleep. We call it different names: belonging, meaning, love. But maybe all of it, every search, every ache, every moment of inexplicable beauty, maybe it all traces back to something that happened before your first memory, in a quiet room behind closed eyes, and left a mark so deep that no amount of living has ever fully covered it. So here's what I want you to think about. If your brain encoded your very first emotional memory before you were even born, what else are you carrying that you don't know about? Because the next video we're making answers exactly that question, and what scientists have found in your unconscious mind will make this one look like a warm-up. Drop a comment with one word that describes the feeling you can't name, the ache that has no reason. Let's see what comes up.